Hey everyone. As you're coming in, just let me know that you can see me, let me know that you can hear me, say hi, things like that. Excellent. Hi, Watson. Awesome. So people are coming in, they can see me, they can hear me. Super. And hopefully everything stays this easy then. All right. I'm back to this. I'll figure it out. I didn't figure it out this last week, but it's okay. Excellent. So tonight we are talking about when to go back to some foundation skill. How do you know when to go back? How do you know if you can't just work through the problem at the current level that you're working through it? Should you go back? How long should you stay back? Once you go back, do you just, I mean, sometimes I feel like well, look at that. There's a YouTube user. That's really cool, Kathy. So, all right, well, that just confuses me further because YouTube is showing me the names and Facebook isn't. So that's interesting. I'll write myself a note because this is exactly what happened. Is I said I was going to fix it from last week to this week, but I didn't write it down, so it didn't get fixed. And that's just how my life works. If it doesn't get written down, it doesn't happen. This is super. There are people from YouTube and Facebook, and we're all commenting, and I can see them both. Comments do work on YouTube. I have never been successful using YouTube on my phone and being able to comment, but there might be someone who has. But every time I've watched a YouTube live on the computer, the commenting is super easy. So yeah, if you need to log off of Facebook, if you're on my mailing list, you got the link emailed to you. Oh, Kim says she's commenting on her phone, so she gets a gold star for figuring that out because I couldn't. So sure, if like I said, if you're on my email list, go check your email because you have a link in your email. And if you are not, I can post, or if someone could post the YouTube link on Facebook, then if you want to swap over, that's where I'll be. But I can see both. I can see both comments all in the same spot. So hopefully they're kind of coming in the order. I'm not having to go back and forth. So and who knows, maybe the quality will be better on YouTube. I don't know how that works. Anyways. Okay. This is exciting. We have YouTube users, we have Facebook users, and I have all the comments in one spot. This is great. All right. So, if I'm training a behavior and whether I start to notice it's kind of going downhill whether, and it could be going downhill either in training or, oh my gosh, people are watching from YouTube. It's so exciting. But someone did share the link to the YouTube if you want to swap over. And I think I can see the total number watching, so that's cool. So whether I'm training or whether I'm competing, my data is showing that my behavior is starting to deteriorate. So my options then are, do I just stay at that current level and try and reinforce my way out of it? Or do I go backwards a little bit and pick out this specific piece and kind of beef it up? Is there a difference in what? Between YouTube and Facebook? No. But if it's something else, clarify. So I will, because it's not that I'm resistant to go back to a foundation skill, but I do think sometimes, depending on the kind of trainer you are, we are too quick to go back to a foundation skill. Lizzie says she thinks YouTube is working better. If you're referring to training data, so what I mean is if I'm looking at my videos and my notes based on, well, since I kind of put something together behind on the whiteboard for the teeter, because it's kind of easy to unpack. So if my notes are starting to show some problem with my teeter, my options are, I can just keep going with what I'm doing and maybe try a different reinforcement strategy, or just add reinforcement, right? Because sometimes when we're competing, our behaviors start to deteriorate because they're not being directly reinforced. So in that case, if I'm starting to see my behaviors deteriorate and I think it's because of competition, I can probably just stay exactly where I'm at and just increase my rate of reinforcement for the full height teeter in sequences, things like that. Not usually a need to go back. But if I see a specific issue starting to creep in, like they're going kind of slow across the board, or they're not going straight into their forearm position. Maybe they're stopping a little high and then they're creeping down a little bit, or maybe they're starting to self-release. I can pinpoint what the problem is and just work that piece. And that's kind of what I've done here, simply behind me on the whiteboard. And I try to do this for all of my behaviors, is that, so the teeter, to me, if I were to describe it, I want the dog to run across the board. I want them to stop in their forearm position, very close to the edge of the board. And I want them to wait until they are cued to move again. So then I need to break those three things down into the skills that they need, and then each of those skills can be broken down further. So if my dog is not moving in to the forearm position at the edge of the board, I don't necessarily have to do the full teeter or have access to the full teeter to fix that issue. Does that make sense? So then I would just pull out my prop, whatever I can, to practice the 4 on, and go from there. So then I can address, does the dog not understand where to stop? So I can focus just on that, or I can focus on just building duration if it's a problem that they don't understand when to stop and when to go. So if you pinpoint the actual problem, then you can go back to that one specific foundation behavior, fix it, and then go right back to where you were, and you're probably fine. Because I would rather do that, go back, add reinforcement to that one piece, then reinsert that piece into the whole behavior, than doing the whole behavior. It might get it done. But when you reinforce the whole behavior, you're not necessarily reinforcing the tiny pieces of the behavior you're wanting to build. Not directly, anyways. So if you know what the problem is, it's much easier to pull the problem out of the chain, focus on on fixing that one link, and then putting that link back into the chain. Any questions about that? Wendy says YouTube is better. So, well, then I'm super glad that that I got this set up. Okay. So then how long do you stay there? Everyone's saying, yeah, that's true. Kadeen says, can't heart me on YouTube. YouTube should fix that, but I appreciate it. So then how long do you stay there? So you've pulled this one particular link out. You've pulled a link out. You're decided to spend a few training sessions. How do you know when to put it back in? I don't think you can totally know for sure when to put it back in. When you're not talking, you get really still, have to look closely to see if you're there. Yeah, it's my like thinking space, I guess. If I'm thinking, I'm not moving, and if I'm talking, I'm moving all over the place. It's like a problem. So typically I would do 2 or 3 training sessions, and then I would attempt to put the link back in if those training sessions are going well. Sometimes we pull a link out and we actually find that there are some other things happening. So that could happen too. If you choose to pull out the link to work on, your fore-on position at a distance, but you actually realize the dog is just self-releasing. The dog isn't confused about the position. The dog is confused about when to move. Then you have to swap gears. So sometimes we make the wrong choice of which link to pull out. But by pulling out a link and kind of guessing, like, okay, I think this is the problem, you pull that link out and then it gets you closer to the actual problem. So it might take you a little bit to kind of dig your way out of these foundation pieces, but there's nothing wrong. And I actually think even if you're not fixing a problem, we'll get into that in a bit. But there's no harm in revisiting these different foundation pieces at any point, because strengthening the links of the chain is only going to make the entire chain better. Any questions so far? Ava's making hearts on YouTube. So on the point of you don't have to have a problem to solve to go back to these skills. What I mean is every time you compete, you are putting stress on the chain, right? You're taking out of the reinforcement jar so you can refill the jar without having access to a full course or all of the equipment, because so many of the skills that we need for one obstacle behavior, we can piece apart and work on individually in our living rooms. So I would say I guess I go back to foundation skills pretty frequently, but I don't stay there. I make sure to put those small links and pieces back into the bigger picture. Not every day, not even, every week, but certainly at some point before I compete, I make sure that the whole chain still holds up together. But the majority of my training is focusing on the individual links. So radio silence out there. No comments. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. So when I put it back in the chain, do I do the full chain? So if we're talking about the teeter, yeah. So if I decided that it was a position problem and I took that out and I did 2 or 3 sessions on just, building up the dog's understanding of the 4 on position, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to put it on the real teeter. I'm not going to work my way back through every step if I think I've pinpointed the problem. I'm just going to, power up that one link and then put it back in the whole thing. Now, if I think there are multiple broken links, I need to fix each individual link before chaining them back together. And if that's the case, I'm kind of more in a retraining process, so I might re-chain them as well. So a lot of it does depend, but in general, just pull the one link out, power it up, put it back in, and boom, you're on your way. In general. I do often talk about splitting behaviors, and this all ties in there because I think we can do better than say my dog has a teeter problem, or my dog has a weave pull problem, or my dog has a start line problem. I think we can do better than that in pulling apart what the actual problem is and working on the problem. Because by doing the whole thing and not really knowing what the problem is, you could potentially be making the problem worse. And also, you don't want the problem behavior, the problem link, to infect the rest of your chain. Because if the rest of the chain is having to cover up for the crap job that your broken link is doing, all the other links are going to start to get tired too and start to wear out. How often do you fix a link only, then to find is another one needing attention, not realizing it at first? Depends on the dog. A lot, right? Because when you choose which link to pull out and work on, it's an educated guess, and we're all at different points in our education, and we're all at different points with our education with that specific dog. So with my students' dogs, I'll be like, all right, let's work on this. And turns out the dog doesn't have a problem with that. I'm like, oh, okay, let's try something else. Let's work on this. And oh, that's fine too. Okay, let's work on this. And you also have to consider, let's work on this in the conditions in which they are happening. So you might pull out a link and the dog is behaving perfectly, but your conditions are too sterile. You've gone too far back. And of course, the dog doesn't have a problem with that piece in this under these conditions. You can pull that link out and do them under more distracting conditions, and you might find that you see the problem again. So if you get frustrated in the moment and stop observing, this is what videoing is for. Because then you can train, you can have your human moment of frustration, and then you can go back and you can watch the video with a different mindset on, and and plan your actionable steps. Totally fine to be frustrated. You're allowed those things. But then it's what you do after that moment. Yes, absolutely. So deciding on which link to pull out and work, and it, you have to have had that experience. The and you see it all the time when I know um you'll be at a dog show and something will happen, and someone is very matter of fact and says, well, that happened because boom. And they say it in a way that makes it like this is the only reason it could be happening. And depending on where you are in your training journey, you might believe them. But I have found that there's almost always more than one reason for everything to be happening. There has to be, I think, because there's different types of consequences, and the learner gets to decide if this consequence is reinforcing or not. So there's always more than one reason for something happening. But depending on where you are in your learning history of training, you might only be aware of one reason something is happening. So you start to go down that road, and it gets you nowhere because that's the only road you went down. But when you have a learning history that says, well, there could be 4 reasons this is happening, and you can explore each of those routes, you're more likely to find the answer. That's unfortunate that, right now you're running into that dog that, frustrates you more than anything. Um, but man, they're the dogs that, and I know you've heard this and it's so cliche, but they are really the dogs that make you a good dog trainer. And it's kind of what we're asking for. These dogs are getting smarter, and these dogs are getting more. I don't know if they want to say more complex, but they they're just holding us to higher standards. And I also think it does have a little bit of that. The better we get, the better they want us to be, because they learn to expect it. Yeah, all the everyone on Facebook has been labeled as unknown again. I had that solved, and then when I added in the YouTube streaming, it took away that. So I just had to fix it eventually. Okay. I'm making sure that I didn't take notes for this one. I was a little bit behind. Um, behind this week, but I didn't want it to, I don't want it to sound like we spend all of our time at foundations, but I also want to kind of point out that you never leave there. So those of you feeling stuck in foundation land, what does that mean? Is I want to address it, but I want to make sure that I understand it. So if you feel stuck, like you don't know when and how to progress back, tell me about that right now. Because I feel like maybe we have to discuss just pulling one piece out and working on it versus totally retraining something. Let me know if that's the direction we should go in. My dogs are the cutest sleepers. Okay, so someone says that they don't feel stuck in foundation, that they like it, they enjoy it. I enjoy it too, especially because you can increase the difficulty of each individual skill without overwhelming them, so to speak. And I think you can get a lot more enthusiasm for each piece without needing to do the whole thing. Kathy wants to know if it just applies to equipment or can it also apply to general behavior in the ring? It applies to all behavior. Because most, especially in agility, none of our behaviors are like single one-off behaviors, right? They're even jumping. There's a series of behaviors included in a jump or in a start line routine or in a ring entry. It's all these sequenced behaviors, or a dog walk is several behaviors chained together. Weave poles, I don't want to talk about weave poles as a chain or not. Teeter, it's several behaviors chained together under one cue from you, but everything can be pulled apart and strengthened one link at a time. I don't always know how to increase criteria so you stay at one level. So in general, if you're going, go back and watch the live, if you haven't, on proofing behaviors, because we talked a lot about the things that you can add to your training so that you're not just doing the same training session again over and over and over. Okay, so you can add layers of difficulty by changing location is an easy one, or it's one that we've done for a long time, but maybe not so easy. And it's not as easy to do because you can't necessarily control the environment, but you can take the same behavior, move it to a different room, move it to a park, move it to a different building, and it becomes a whole new challenge. If your dog doesn't really, if that's not challenging to your dog, it might at least be interesting because it's different. The other thing that we can do is we can add social distractions. So dogs usually can do things when we're by ourselves, no one's watching, but can you cue consistently when you have people watching? And can your dog respond consistently when you have people watching? So that is changing the criteria, even if you aren't making the behavior more difficult. And I think that is overlooked. So anytime you change the conditions of the behavior surrounding where and how you want the behavior to happen, you have changed the criteria. Does that make sense? More examples of working one piece of the chain. Well, it's right now in the jumping workshop, since I just recorded that, you can break down commitment to the obstacle and keeping commitment to the obstacle away from the obstacles. So if I start to see that my dog is getting a little bit sticky, a little bit too handler focused, I can choose to change my reinforcement strategy and just keep sequencing to try to build that. Or I can take that piece out and go put and set up a keeping commitment exercise that doesn't include any equipment and just build up that piece of the chain. Then when the dog is easily going to things, I don't feel like they're being sticky on me anymore. They're passing me. They're not pacing my speed. Then I can go back to sequencing and see if I've repaired that link. So that was a handling example. And then an obstacle example would be weave poles. You've got, if your dog is struggling to hit an entry, I would get rid of all the other poles and just work the entry. I would have one gap, so 2 poles, and I would pull that sucker out and I would power up that entry that the dog is struggling with, and then I would put it back into the full chain with all 12 poles. Does that make sense? Hard to find the right splits to progress the behavior to be reliable enough with the arousal of agility. So I feel stuck in foundation. So like I mentioned, it might not be that you need another split of the actual behavior, but you might need more splits of the conditions surrounding the behavior, because those also matter. Which leads me to a good point that even if you have a chart like this behind me for every obstacle you train and you pull it out, like I think I mentioned it earlier, you might find that in your living room you don't have a problem. It's because you need to match the conditions that your dog is struggling with and split those apart. So when I'm working with my private clients, I often will I need a list of locations that you can access, and I need them listed in order of how they affect your dog's arousal, right? So front yard, backyard, parking lot, park, agility field, class, right? You have to find those places, and that might take a little bit more effort to split those conditions apart. We can split those conditions apart with our reinforcers. You know, kibble, chicken, steak, fish, robot, food coming out of a robot, food in a dish, food being thrown, food being collected from your hand. You can control those conditions a little bit more. So I tend to go there and split the conditions that way first. I'm also kind of lazy, so I don't go very far. This whole, shelter in place stuff, COVID stuff works well for me because I'm very good at staying at home. But so it might not be the behavior you need to split. Okay, so then Nikki's question is about sort of when you move from like a foundation piece more into a sequencing piece. So when you make that little bit, that kind of leap, things are falling apart. So then, and you're saying he's not able to slow down or collect for a turn. Then you pull that piece out. We're going to pull the slowing down part and see if we can just work on So first we would check that he has a reinforcement history for slowing down. And this is, I do specifically address this in the jumping workshop, because dogs, um, they do what they're reinforced. So a lot of times we think we are reinforcing them for collecting. And I think maybe I talked about it last week too. All my talking is running together. I don't know what I've said, where I've said it, and who I've said it to. So just keep asking questions. But when you're working on collection, if the dog only gets rewarded after jumping, he's unlikely to connect that he got reinforced for slowing down. In his head, he probably got reinforced for jumping. So then, of course, you add a little bit of arousal, which means course running, and poof, the slowing down is gone. So we have to focus on reinforcing the slowing down in the context of longer sequences. I put my dog walk away a month ago to work on other things. When getting it out again, should I start with basic foundation work first before running across it? This is a great question, Kadeen, because I don't feel like dogs forget much. If the reinforcement history was there, it will still be there when you return to it. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to mess up, or the conditions of, oh my God, I haven't seen the dog walk in ages, adds in a layer of arousal that you weren't prepared for. Like, things like that can happen. But if you had a full jar and you put it on the shelf and no one touched that jar, when you take the jar off the shelf, all of your reinforcement should still be in it, assuming the conditions are the same. Now, time has passed and you've been training other things, so the conditions are not exactly the same. But in general, the reinforcement history is still there. So I wouldn't necessarily start at a lower level than when I put it away. That was a great question, though. Okay, am I caught up on questions? Those of you in Bellingham, Dave is, or, in Western Washington area, if you want to drive up to Bellingham, Dave's offering his equipment and field. That's really nice, Dave. Dave also needs socializing, so you guys should go see him. Yeah, I don't think you should be too worried about pulling it out, Kadeen. I think it'll be fine. Ask her. She might tell you something differently than I'm telling you, but oh, good, Kathy. I'm glad someone laughed, because, and I need people to laugh at me when I think I'm being funny. Okay, perfect. As long as someone else thought I was funny, I'm good. But honestly, I thought I was hysterical, so it was good. Okay, so pull the problem link out, train a few sessions, put it back in, see where it goes. I mean, honestly, I'm probably going to need some remedial socialization, or I don't know, something. It's it's all a little bit of an experiment. pull the link out that you think needs work, work on it, change the conditions, increase something, put it back in, observe, and respond appropriately. There are no, does Dave bite or is he just shy? I've not seen him react aggressively to other humans. So I do not think he has a bite history. I would bring young humans around him. Oh my gosh, Dave, this is funny. I hope you think it's funny. Anyway, it's just, there are no like perfect answers. There's no, pull this part out, train it for 3 sessions, 3 times a week for 2 minutes each training session, and then it's fixed. There's no magic formula for it. You do have to take your best educated guess and then observe and respond. And I probably sound like a broken record, but it does mean you're going to have to take some notes and video your training and keep some form of records to get educated on your dog's behavior. So, Helen, when do I start putting them on the whole dog walk? When you like what you're seeing on the bottom. If you've pulled out a piece and you're working on just the bottom of the dog walk and A-frame, when you like that, then you increase to doing half of the thing, half of the obstacle. And then when you like what you see there, you increase to doing the whole thing. But there's no set answer. No, there's no set number of training sessions. It's okay, I like this, I'm going to move on. If the dog is not having any issues, do you still go back and do some foundation? I guess it depends on what you define foundation as. Because I break my training. I'm either doing like a handling skill that's more about me, or an obstacle skill that's more about the dog, or I'm doing sequencing that's more about both of us. And if everything's going fine, then we're just going to keep training the way what my plan is to train. I'm going to keep improving on the things that I want to be improving on, or adding new things or whatsoever. But even if there's not a problem, I think this is my real answer. Even if there's not a problem, it's worth it to your full behavior chains to go back and reinforce smaller pieces of your chains. What is half a dog walk? Start them in the middle. So when I teach my 2-on 2-off dog walk, I back chain it on the full height dog walk. I teach them the end behavior on a prop, then I transfer that end behavior onto the real dog walk, full height, and then I just back chain. So if they're ready for more, then I just start them in the middle. Pick them up and put them up there, or walk them across it on their collar, or let them walk across and turn around. Whatever's cozy and makes the most sense. With Shrek, I pick them up and put them up there, but I don't do that with Smack. Cool. Okay, so there's no magic formula. you do have to pay attention to what behaviors are kind of looking a little rough or what pieces of the behavior are looking a little rough. Because that's where you're going to find where your actual problems lie most of the time, is when we are taking some effort to break these apart and work on the pieces. Whereas in general, if I'm doing sequencing, I don't include my contacts and weave poles unless I want to work on my contacts and weave poles. So I try to split things apart as much as I can anyways, so that I can just train the one thing without potentially, opening up a rabbit hole. And drop my pen. I wasn't using it anyways, I just needed my fingers to do something. So it's okay. Okay. Do you guys have more questions? I'm going to just turn it over to you guys for a bit. Smack lifted his head, realized it wasn't about him, and then laid back down, and Shock just stared at me, judging me. I'm certain of it. Okay, no magic formula. If you're experiencing a problem, make your best educated guess as to what the problem might be. Pull that piece out of the chain, work on it for a few sessions, insert it back into the chain, and then move on and see, observe. If it's fixed, it's fixed. Yay, you're done. If it's not, okay, either that wasn't the link that was broken, or you didn't repair that link enough. If you've got multiple broken links in the chain, you might be better off doing a complete retrain of the whole thing and then piecing them back together slowly. Okay, that's just a side conversation, not questions for me. When you pull a link out, work on it, and put it back in, you don't have to go back to that piece and then build up step by step by step by step again, as if you're retraining it or training it for the first time. I think for fixing small problems in the small pieces, no problem to go back and forth between a piece of the behavior and the whole behavior. I think that's fine. So if the dog's doing really good at home and it wasn't what you wanted in class, then that's too big of a leap in the conditions. So I might try to find a location that isn't your home, but isn't as exciting as class. So maybe a new spot that doesn't have, so maybe like a friend's place. So there aren't as many dogs around, not as many people, It would still be exciting because it's new, but it wouldn't be exciting because, oh my God, I expect agility here. So I would look for a middle point, a middle ground between at home and in class. So let's say you want to increase speed on the dog walk. How do you isolate the speed part or any other part without the end behavior? So I could teach speed across anything. I could just teach speed on a board. I could take that concept out and not expect the behavior. I could just teach the dog how to run across a board or just how to run across on the flat. And then I might ask myself, is it a motivation problem? I just had to, so speed board, I have motivation and I have confidence. So is it a motivation issue? So is my dog going slow because he doesn't want what I have to offer him? Or is it a confidence issue? He's not quite sure how to go fast or if he can go fast, things like that. So I might go about it a little bit differently. And is the lack of speed related to the position, the end position? Because if he's not going fast across the dog walk because he's unsure about the position, then I would choose to put my training effort into building motivation and confidence for the position. So this is what happens when you have more than one reason for why the dog might be going slowly. So we could try multiple things. We could isolate these things and work on them all at the same time. I might have just a flat board on the ground and just teaching the dog how to go fast over that. I might even put it on cue because I can always transfer. And I did it with Smack at one point because he was starting to creep over the dog walk because he had some confusion over in position criteria. So I taught him what go, go, go meant on the ground. And then I just set it on the dog walk. And eventually it transferred to the old cue. So I didn't have to say it anymore. Or I could, if I started to see him get a little sticky, I could be like, go, go, go. Oh, thank God. Just like, that would have been bad if they had all stood up. So you can do it that way, or you can go up with Shrek. His speed across the board came through his very clear understanding about get into position as quickly as you can. But he only went quickly because he wanted the reinforcer that I was using. Same for going back to foundation work if there is no problem. I don't know. Clarify your question, Diane, because I don't know exactly what I had said when it popped up. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think you can still pull it apart. So even though I teach my dog walk through complete back chaining, I can still, if my dog doesn't have the concept of running across the board, either because I taught it or because it's just become a product of the back chaining. If he doesn't understand that, it needs to be pulled out and taught. So Smack didn't learn to go fast across the dog walk because of clear confidence and motivation for 2 on 2 off. I don't think he learned that. I think he went fast across the thing because he did everything kind of quickly. But as soon as there was confusion about the end behavior, it went away. But I could teach it. So I just taught it as its own separate behavior. All right. Diane, clarify your question for me. But otherwise, I'm going to give you guys another minute or two to get some questions in. And then we'll just wrap this up. I'm going to grab my notebook. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Okay. As regarding not needing to build everything back up slowly after pulling out a piece. I have pieces of foundation work I never knew or taught before I went to add back. Right. So yeah, so in this case, we're doing some things with Hoover's weaves. He knows how to weave, right? He understands the concept. So I don't think you have to rebuild everything. I think his original reinforcement history is not, because we're not retraining. We don't want to replace the old reinforcement history for everything he knows about weaving. So I think that's a little bit the difference for me, because I don't want, we're not going back and improving on links because we want to like change anything. We just want to enhance what he already knows. But his weave poles were already quite good. He knew them. He didn't have any major problems. They were certainly manageable, but adding in these skills, you can just, like, if you went back to 12 poles tomorrow, I think you'd be fine. And kind of a little bit the same on the dog walk. You might not see the same behavior, but I bet you would see things that are different. If you put them on a full height dog walk tomorrow, the new reinforcement history for working on these foundation skills would show up. It might not overshadow your existing reinforcement history yet, but I bet it would show up. Yes, I agree. I think when we don't we don't have to retrain to see the benefits of going back to foundations. I have a list somewhere. Okay. I have no idea what we're going to talk about next week, but I have a list of things that we could. So I will put it in the group and we'll figure it out. And of course, if you have additional ideas, I have enough to keep me busy for several months. So I'll figure something out and we'll do another one of these next week. Okay. One more question. So if you want to add some weave entries that you never worked on, you can work on those without working the ones the dog knows. Yes. And that really is kind of how I would do it. That would be a specific training session, is to focus on those entries that my dog struggles with. And then those entries that I struggle with, I might need to build up piece by piece, because if my dog's never seen them before, I might need to introduce them over and over and over. And under different conditions and with different distractions. I might not be able to do 1 or 2 sessions of something my dog's never seen and then put it back into the full chain. I might have to take those entries and put them through the whole training process, but I don't need to train every entry through the whole training process again. Okay. Thank you guys for joining me. I think this was great. YouTube works. That's the most important part. And then for clarification, I mean, entries, I work with as few poles as possible. So yes. And most of my weave pole training is on fewer poles, unless it's something that I really need them to do 12 on. Okay. Awesome. I will post some ideas for next week in the group, and I'll probably do it tomorrow. But I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining.